One of the most important things when doing a breadboard end is to make sure that your cat is not in the shot. Hey guys, for those of you that don't already know, my name is Drew Short, owner of Woodshop on YouTube. And if this is your first time here on the channel, I want to welcome you. Please be sure and click the subscribe button you see over here in the corner and hit the notification bell. Every time I drop new content, you'll be notified. So let's get started on the project of making breadboards. Now, I'm not going to go into the specifics of making tongue and groove joinery because I've already done a video prior to that, and you'll find the link up there in the corner of the screen. And it just goes to show how you can make it with a normal saw blade as well as a dado stack using nothing but your table saw. However, if you want to go about making it with your router table, that's fine too. Now, this project all started with a collaborative effort from Gratland down in Houston, Texas. He contacted me and asked if I would like to be a part of this. So we are making these tables for a restaurant down in his hometown. He is actually making a big one while I am making 5 smaller ones. And he is making his breadboard ends using dominoes. So if you're interested in learning how to do either method, go check Ryan's video out. It should be out very shortly. And if you've ever made breadboard ends, I would really like to know about it. Give me a like on this video and drop a comment down below. Now, a breadboard end serves 2 functions, looks and stability. Looks, it's cool. It caps off the table and finishes it out. Stability, it keeps the tabletop flat with wood movement over time. Now, like I said, I've seen many different ways that people make these, and most of the common ways is with pocket screws. And unfortunately, pocket screws don't allow for wood movement because the hole from the long board into the breadboard end is not oversized enough to allow the movement of the screw. So if you're going to use pocket screws, take the time and make that hole bigger. I've seen people use biscuits before, which is another method I don't recommend because you're going to have to glue the breadboard end onto the long boards, and if you lock it in place like that, your table is going to crack. Not to mention, the thin piece of beech that is a biscuit is going to break most of the time when people go to pick this thing up and down. So you are going to have to make some kind of a tenon, either with dominoes or loose tenons or integral tenons like I do. They can be stop tenons or they can be through tenons like I have. And then they're just pinned in place with dowels. So I have a question for you. How would you, or how do you, make your breadboard ends? Do you use dominoes? Do you use Craig screws? Do you use a stop tenon or through tenon? Let me know your thoughts on how you make your tabletops down below. I'd love to hear them. So if you look at the construction of this table, I actually made this tongue prior to assembling the table, mainly just because that's what I'm comfortable doing. So whenever I did my glue up, I made sure that the joints of the table were all nice and flush. That way when the breadboard end comes up against them, you won't see gaps. So as you can see here, I do have a layout line for my first dowel pin that will be in correlation to the first piece going this direction. Now, I do have a 1-inch wide tenon that stops right about here. I am doing a 3/8 inch dowel pin. So I'm going to set that back right in the middle, which is half. So I'm going to just lay out a line right here that I need to drill a 3/8 inch hole. Now before I start drilling, even though I'm using a brad point bit in my drill press, I like to use a punch and just make a divot in the starter hole area so the bit won't have a tendency to wander. Now I'm just going to run the brad point bit through the starter divot all the way to the back side where the brad point bit just barely comes through, and then I'll turn it over and finish the hole. Now the big reason why I like to do through holes, which is basically both sides of the breadboard end, is people will inevitably try and pick this thing up by the breadboard end like I mentioned earlier, and having a dowel that goes all the way through the tenon and into the other side of the breadboard end just gives it that much more stability. One last thing I like to do before taking it out of the clamps is to scribe a line, so I know exactly where to line this back up and which breadboard end I need to use right here because there might be a subtle difference from one end to the other. Now with all those holes drilled, take it out of the clamps and take the breadboard ends back off. Now here comes the tricky part about wood movement in regards to breadboard ends. Like I said, you need to accommodate for it. So what I've got in my drill is basically a reaming bit or a hole cutting bit. It's made for wood, metal, plastic, and it has a really aggressive tooth set up on the center of the bit. Now, if you don't have one of these, that's perfectly fine. You can use a normal drill bit. However, I do have these in my Amazon store. They're only about $7 for a set of 6, and they're all different sizes. So it's really aggressive to hog out a hole if you're needing to widen it left or right or all the way around. So one thing you want to keep in mind whenever you allow for this wood movement is leave the center hole alone. Don't change a thing because you want to limit your movement from the center outward. And you don't want this center panel to move very much, or the dowel pin for that matter. So leave it exactly the same as you drilled it and then widen the adjacent holes further out. So now glue up is one of the more important things that you have to pay attention to. This is the center panel that you're watching right now, and I'm just putting a little bit of glue in the center of the panel on either side of the pin. I'm not doing the entire panel because I don't want the entire panel locked in place because it also has to move from side to side. So just put it on either side of the pin and then leave the rest to expand and contract. Then just clamp everything back in place and get ready to put in the dowels. Here's a little tip: when you're flush trimming your dowels with your saw and you want to prevent scratching on the surface, take you a piece of paper or plastic with the same hole size roughly as your dowel. Slide it over the dowel, and that way your saw can ride up against it without scratching the surface. So after just a little bit of sanding and finish, these things are ready for delivery. I hope this has really shed some light on how to make breadboard ends the right way to make sure that you account for wood movement. If you have failed in the past, don't worry. It's like I tell my daughter, failure is how you learn. And if you don't fail, you're never going to figure out how to do it better. So find something that works, don't be afraid to experiment, and just get out there and make it. So guys, thank you very much for joining me. Hope you enjoyed it. Be sure and subscribe if you haven't done so. Click the notification bell. Follow me on all my social media, and I will see you on the next video. Boom!